I'm Chad Roberts, and I want to welcome you to this series called We the People. Our team has created this resource because, probably like you, we are greatly concerned about the direction our country is going. We believe that there are some important voices that can lend to the conversation. As a matter of fact, rather than arguing, rather than yelling or screaming or demanding our point of view, what we want to do is we want to have conversations. We want to create great and engaging conversation. What you and I are witnessing is the dismantling of our country. What does it mean? Where is it leading? Most important, what can we do about it? As Christians, we have always enjoyed sort of a home field advantage in America. I don't think I have to tell you that has changed. So how are we to think? How are we to process what we see and what we hear going on in the country today? Most important, how are we to respond? That's what this series is about. We want to learn how to think well. We want to think correctly, and as a result, we want to respond rightly to the challenges that is facing our country. You know, what goes on in Washington, most of us feel like we're very limited in how we can change that, short possibly of our vote. As Christians, we have always enjoyed home field advantage in America. But I don't have to tell you, that has changed. What we cannot lose sight of as Christ followers is that behind every headline rages a fierce spiritual war. You and I cannot get entangled in all of the arguments, in all of the divisiveness of this day. No, you and I need to rise above all of that. We need to create civil conversation. We need to have logical debate. We need to have civil discourse. But we don't need to get entangled in the rhetoric, in the divisiveness, in the hatred that we see in today's America. No, we need to rise above it. That's what this project is about. This summer, I read one of the greatest books of the year that I've read yet, and it was called The Accidental President. It was about Harry S. Truman. I've enjoyed so much learning more about his presidency and his life. And in Truman's first address to Congress after FDR passed unexpectedly, Truman said these amazing words. He said, "What brings us together as Americans are our values." Now, fast forward to today, to the current administration, I heard our president say, what brings us together as Americans is our love for the country. Now, I noticed a big difference there. I don't know if you've ever been to the beach and leisurely spent time in the water and allowed the water to drift you. Then all of a sudden, you look around and you're in an unfamiliar place. Nothing looks the same to you. That's a scary feeling. I think that's where we are as a country. We have drifted from our values. If we can go back and identify what our values are, then whether you're left or you're right, whether you're blue or you're red, whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, you can appreciate, you can respect our values. The problem is, in my view, we've drifted from those values. And so now our leadership says it's our love for country. No, I think it's greater than that. I think it's back to what Truman said. It's our values. If we can rediscover that, I think it would bring us back to some common ground. That's why we've created this resource called We the People. I want you to find optimism. I want you to find hope. I want you to find God in today's America. And I think much of that depends upon our attitude and whether or not we will choose that. I hope this resource helps you in your thinking, in the confusion of today, the noise of today, the various narratives of today. Let's rise above it. Let's go back to our values. Let's look to the Lord, and let's let Him change our nation as He desires to do. Thank you for listening. My guest right now, I've enjoyed getting to know so much. His name is John Lundberg, and he is a state senator, one of our state senators for Tennessee. John, I want to welcome you today, and I'm so thrilled to have you as a guest.
Great to be here. You said short program. I can talk for a long time. So,
Well, John, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, kind of some things that you've done in your past. You have such a remarkable background with your service career and other things that you've done. And then tell us what led you to get into politics and how you're serving right now today.
you bet. Probably I'll start with the crowning achievement. Married almost 32 years. So 2 kids, a daughter who is just turned 31 and a son who's 25.
Wonderful.
And they're all great. And I started in broadcast news and spent about 5 years in broadcast news before I moved to Bristol. Did the 5:30 and 11 o'clock news on Channel 5 long ago, and always wanted to start my own company, and started that almost 30 years ago. And in between all that, spent a great deal of time in the Navy Reserve, 29 years, commanded 7 units and retired in 17. Had the opportunity to work for some amazing people there. I worked for Secretary Rumsfeld in the Department of Defense. My last job was I was the senior advisor to the chairman of the Joint Staff.
Wow.
And I have been blessed in many, many ways. I've served in the Senate now. This is my 2nd term.
Yes.
So I'm going into my 7th year, and I spent 5 terms, which is 10 years in the House before this.
Wow. Very fascinating. Well, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for the way that you're serving our state and our communities today. Well, I'm excited to get your perspective because as we've talked and I've got to know you a little better, I enjoy your perspective, and I hope that you can help people like myself who have a lot of questions right now, people who not quite sure what to do in the climate we're living in right now politically. You know, a recent poll that was highlighted through ABC and NBC was that 85% of Americans, think about that, they are concerned about the direction our country is going. Are you concerned about the direction we're moving?
Sure.
How so?
Double D's. So the easy answer to that would be I'm concerned about the direction the government's going because we have a massive amount of debt. Never before in our history have we had debt like this, $30 trillion, astronomical figure. Perspective for you, in Tennessee, we have a great economy, and this is not a plug for Tennessee, and we have some debt, but if we wanted to pay off every bit of debt in Tennessee, every man, woman, and child would have to write a check for about $287. It's a lot of money, but I think in general, we could probably pay that off if we all needed to desperately. In the federal government, if we needed to pay off that debt, every man, woman, and child would have to write a check for about $90,000.
Wow.
I can't do that.
What a difference.
And it's huge, but a bigger, not bigger, but maybe equally concerning one to me is we have been growing more and more dependent, not just on the dollar, but on government. That concerns me when individuals look to government to solve the problems and the issues. That's not how we were founded. Government is not the answer. It's individual accountability and responsibility, ultimately. And we seem to be going a different way. That dramatically concerns me. And politicians, no offense since I am one, seem to be putting out those kinds of things to attract attention to themselves and go, I'm here to fix this problem. Government does not fix problems. It usually creates them.
That's right.
And that's a huge concern. And that's regardless of your political party. We're not the answer. You know what concerns me is today, 9.1 million people work for the federal government. That's over 6% of the entire workforce, of everyone working. 6 out of 100 people work for the federal government. That concerns me. I was, candidly, when I first ran for office, I was cynical of government. I am more cynical of government now than I was before.
Wow. And I think those are the exact type of people we need in office.
Yeah, I think the people that should run for office are the ones who don't want to run for office, who don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so many times, and I think that's also why some of what we do is backwards, because we look often to politicians and they're exalted, they're politicians. No. If you look in any company, you look to the CEO and they're in charge, they can hire and fire everyone. Well, myself, the governor can't fire me, so the Speaker of the Senate can't fire me, but individuals can. And they need to realize the power is with people.
That's right. We the people.
We the people. But fundamentally, I think in so many ways, we have forgotten that politicians work for us.
That's right.
Because we are a republic, and that's how this was designed, not the other way around. So, sorry.
No, you're touching on exactly why we're wanting to create this project, because when you think about we the people, I heard the other day one of our founding fathers, I was reading something where they were saying that in America, you talked about us being a republic and this is how we were founded. They said, in America, you will not be able to inherit a title. You will not become a senator because your father was a senator.
Right.
No, you're voted in. It's we the people.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons, Senator Lundberg, why we want to do this, we want to speak to people particularly who don't know what to do. Perhaps they feel really discouraged in the divisiveness and the climate that we live in. Maybe they just go, well, why should I care? We're constantly hearing narratives. We're always hearing negativity. What would you say to someone who goes, well, why vote or why get involved even in the local level because I don't feel like I can make a difference? What would you say to them?
You make all the difference. That's how this whole thing was founded and started. And the local level is the most critical level around. In the example that I give is, we talk just like we were talking about, those we exalt. We talk about the presidential election and those who are running for president or U.S. senator or Congress people. Well, those federal officials can impact and change our life a year from now. As your state senator, I can impact and change your life 6 months from now. As your local school board of mayor and aldermen, city council, they can affect your life tomorrow. And that's critical. So I would tell people, number one, vote, but also not just in the presidential election. Don't come out to vote just every 4 years and say it mattered. It matters locally more than anything. And to get involved. Ask questions. Are you going to get frustrated? I don't know anyone who's not, and will always be, but that's the beauty of this. Ask questions. Determine what's important to you. And there's a lot of noise, a lot of chatter out there because, we hear, 30 years ago we had ABC, NBC, CBS, and today we have ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and everything else. And it's like, okay, clear that slate and go, what's important to you? What's important to your family? What's important to your neighborhood, your community, your state?
Your backyard.
And go from there. And go, these are my critical important issues. And this is my philosophy. my ideology of what's important and why, and this is how I can make an impact.
I think you have a very important story on the power of what just even one vote can do. Talk to us a little bit about, first I want you to share your story about how you won your seat by the slimmest of margins, but then it's not just voting, it's engaging. Talk to us a little bit about that by sharing your story.
Yeah, the first campaign was for state representative, and Representative John Crawford and I ran against each other. He's a great guy. Have immense respect for him. I'll tell you right now, I am incredibly proud that he is my state representative. Yeah. I can tell you about his character and integrity, his family, and there's not enough good things to say. Now, 17 years ago, we ran against each other. Now, I was not against John Crawford, and I don't think he was against me. We were running for
the seat.
The seat.
Yes.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, it wasn't a personal campaign where we were slinging mud at each other. We were just trying to outwork the other person. At the end, I won that race by 17 votes, which, in my mind, I walked down an extra street that maybe he missed and his family. But we're dear friends, and that's important. Now, that 17 votes, when you talk about one vote matters, in my mind, mathematically, that means 9 people could have changed that vote. Because if 9 people didn't vote for me and voted for John, that election would have had a different outcome. And not necessarily a bad one, because John and I, again, philosophically, I think are incredibly similar. And that's a good thing. I wish most politics was like that. It's not. And that's not necessarily, in some cases, bad, because I don't know how in some states I could be quiet and not have some real issues with some of the candidates. But I think it's unfortunate that we've lost it, and now it's not the issues, it's how loud some people can scream.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been in a debate or in an argument, when you start screaming, I'm sorry, you're done. You're not having a logical discussion of an exchange of ideas. Can I change your mind? If I'm screaming at you, you're not going to listen any longer. So.
Yeah. I've noticed such a difference in recent years as well. I can remember, not too terribly long ago, news outlets would have differing opinions as a panel, right? Mm-hmm. And they would discuss issues. Now I notice, on the rare times that does happen, it gets heated so fast, you can't understand anything they're saying, and it's just a disaster.
Yeah, everybody's talking.
Everyone's talking. No one's listening.
Yeah. And there was, in most news programs, there was that clear delineation between this is comment, this is news, and then we go into here's point counterpoint or whatever.
There you go, that's right.
Here are these two individuals who have dramatically different views on whatever the topic, and they go at it, and you go back to whatever the programming is. Well, now media has blurred all that, and that philosophical bent now bleeds into whatever the program is, and it's tough for us, and I mean all of us, to distinguish what's legitimate, what's not, what's news, what's opinion. Every journalist will tell you they have opinions, but you try to keep that out of your broadcasts. I don't think anybody tries anymore, which is sad.
I agree.
Because we lose, when I was in journalism, credibility was all you had. If you misspelled a name or gave a fact incorrectly, you lost credibility, and that's all you had. Now it's one of those where I'm giving opinions. So,
given your background in journalism and broadcasting, I think you could really speak clearly to this. I heard Trey Gowdy say recently that media used to be the referee of society. They would report the facts. Today, now, as you were saying, depending on what side of the aisle they prefer, they tip the scales to what direction they lean. What would you say to an average citizen like myself what would you say to me of how I should hold to common sense, perhaps even hold to my convictions, and not be so influenced by the various narratives that are out there right now?
Keep perspective, and every once in a while you have to, whether it's turn that set off and go, is this really important, or is this the issue of the day and of the moment, or something just to inflame me? Because every party wants to throw red meat out and go, this is an issue that'll get my base excited or get them mad or whatever. Is that really critical? Is that really important to me right now? Try to keep that perspective. Otherwise, I think Gowdy's point is exact. If you look at a basketball game and say, take out the referees, it won't take long for that to be completely out of control.
That's right.
And the outcome is something, frankly, no one wants to watch.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in many ways, we have to become our own referees and take that responsibility and accountability back upon ourselves.
Which goes back to our own backyard, our own communities, even our own families. Would you agree?
Precisely. Absolutely. What's important for you and your family? And that has to be every person's number one priority. I hope. So I know when we hire people at the company, I tell people, if this company and being here and doing whatever it is that we're doing today is the number one most important thing you have in life, then your priorities are poor, because it's got to be your family. Because a job will change, a job will end eventually for all of us, but your family won't. So what's important? And what's important, for your kids, and then for your grandkids. And frankly, you take that even broader and go, what can I do to make that road more clear? You don't want to pave it. For our kids, we want it to be a better life, but we're not going to take care of them for their life. We want to set them up so that they can be individuals and they can succeed and grow and do on their own. That's, if you say, what's the measure of success? I would argue that success isn't the car you drive or how much money you have. You look down of your kids. Are they independent on their own? Do they think well? They might think differently, but that doesn't mean that's bad. Do they think well? And anyway, sorry, I was going off on a tangent.
No, actually, you take us down that road of kids and family. Part of your responsibilities as a state senator is that you're chair of education, correct?
Yes.
Tell me your thoughts on school choice and where you think our state, not just the state of Tennessee, but the country at large. I know Arizona seems to be really leading the way in school choice. I have heard that Tennessee is looking and trying to do the same. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a huge advocate for school choice. We have education savings account. We have school choice in Shelby and Davidson County in small areas. I would expand that everywhere.
Is that kind of like a pilot program?
It is a pilot program. It's only for schools that are failing. And I wish people from here could go to other areas of the state and see what you have to send your child to, what these parents are having to send their child to this school. With a failing school, not only is the school itself physically bad, but the teachers, frankly, the administrators, they need help. And they should have the opportunity to send their children wherever they want to. That's not to take away from public education. By far, we have great public education, especially in East Tennessee.
Right.
But I'm a huge advocate for that independence we have as parents. So, we decide what our children are going to eat at night. So, from 0 to 18, I think we should exercise that control for where they're going to spend the time.
Yeah.
And I think,
do you think other states are going to follow Arizona's lead?
I think so, as long as it continues to go well. So, and I think it will. More control. We talked about control at the local level, federal, state, and local. What works well? It works well for families also.
That's great. Let me ask you this, Senator Lundberg. The push for the current administration to forgive college debt. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Oh, I'm angry. This is one of those things that just angers me. When I'll go back 30 years ago when our first child was born, and my wife and I said we're going to save $25 a week, and we put, maybe it was a month actually, and we're going to put it in a savings account because we want to. I believe part of our role was to take care of education for our kids, and that was money we didn't touch at a time when financially we literally couldn't afford the liquid milk for our kids. We were on the powdered stuff. And we saved and scrimped and put money into the account, never touched it, and did everything we could and worked and put money into that account so that when our kids went to school, we could write a check. And I was very proud of that. And I'm horrified now that we are incentivizing, rewarding those who did not. Now, college these days is incredibly expensive. I don't know how you get by with the kind of debt people are incurring, but the role of government isn't to waive that and say, we're going to take care of it. It's, I'm sorry, it's part of business. If you borrow money, you have to pay it back. Why didn't somebody do that with my car? So, well, you've got a car payment. And would you like a little bonus to take care of your car payment? My guess is yes. Or your mortgage? Yes. So, and politically, that's good. And this is one of those, again, we're focusing on one part where it's a bigger aspect. This goes back to both dependence and debt. When I talked about the $30 trillion in debt at the start, this is part of that.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
That's the word you used that really stood out to me.
It's not. We cannot do that. And, we have to incentivize the opposite to occur. And again, when I talked about government creates more problems, people talk about jobs and how many jobs we've created in the state or how many jobs we've created in the federally. Government doesn't create any jobs. Well, it creates government jobs, but it truly doesn't create any jobs. How many jobs I've created in Nashville? I have an assistant, so I guess you could say I created one job, and I've kept that one. So, but I don't create jobs. We create an environment for either companies to grow,
excellent,
companies to start, companies to relocate here, or we create an environment for them to shrink, to not come here or move away from here. That's what we do. We don't create jobs.
Fantastic. Senator Lundberg, I love your perspectives. I think that you are able to articulate and communicate such a balanced perspective of how we should think in the environment that we are in. I think so many are concerned with the direction we're going. And I don't know if I've heard anyone articulate it better than what you just did for us. Well, Senator Lundberg, I've enjoyed our conversation so much today, and I think you have such a wonderful and balanced perspective. I think you're able to articulate really well how we should view the climate that we're living in. Let me ask you this as we conclude our conversation today. If there was one thing that you could see change in today's climate, what would you hope to see change?
That everyone who is silent, and I think a lot of people who are silent are frankly the majority, we listen to the people who are screaming the loudest and go, we've got to pay attention to them. I wish the people who are quiet wouldn't be, and we could hear from them, and we need to hear from them more. And even if they disagree, disagreement is not a bad thing. That screaming and shouting is, but a disagreement is a great way to find perspective.
It's healthy.
And it is healthy. It is very healthy. And I think that's important. So to get back to that civil discourse, now I understand your perspective. I understand why. And I think about that when I have a dog. I'm a big animal guy, and I remember somebody said you should have a bill about not chaining up dogs outside when it's 10 degrees. And I said, well, that makes sense. Well, then you hear from a farmer in West Tennessee and you go, oh, you're right. You have cattle dogs and you leave them outside. And, well, that does make sense. Now I understand that perspective is completely different. You've changed my mind. I have a different perspective. That's healthy.
Yes.
That's healthy.
I agree fully. Well, Senator, thank you so much for taking your time with us today. Let me ask you one last bonus question. If you weren't doing the job you're doing right now today, what would be your dream job?
I'm doing it. My dream job. I don't know if I want to say this on camera. You know, I like service. I served in the military. I serve in the legislature. In many ways, I like helping people, and like in the military, you're part of something that's much bigger than you. This is going to sound silly, but if I had anything to do, I would probably run a small hotel somewhere on a beach in some Caribbean island. So a 15-room hotel where you can make a difference, and people would come there to get away and having fun.
All right.
I know that sounds silly, but
No, I love it. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service. Thank you for how you're leading our communities and our state. Thank you, sir. Well, today I want to welcome our guest, Dave Clark. Dave, thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having the opportunity.
Dave, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background, the amazing career that you've had, and where you are today.
Well, thank you for the accolades. I'm not sure I'm warranted those. I started my career, was a graduate of West Point, spent a number of years in combat units deployed on the old East German and West German border. Had an opportunity to really see what evil looked like across the wire. I then went to graduate school and went back and taught strategy and national security policy at West Point. Came here 30 years ago, have been an entrepreneur and business owner in this region ever since that time. During that time, I had my reserve duty. I went back and taught. I taught for about another 8 years at West Point as well. And I'm just glad to be here.
Well, thank you for your service to our country. I've enjoyed some of the stories that you've shared with me previously. And I think that you have an important voice in our region. Matter of fact, you write for our paper here, correct?
Yes.
And you've got a column that is coming out about freedom. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's generally titled, What Type of Freedom Do We Want Today? We are in a time in which there appears to be the divisiveness that you spoke about, and I believe a lot of it goes back to how we view freedom in our country. There are really two types of freedom. There is negative freedom and positive freedom, and those are not pejorative terms, those are really descriptive terms. Our Bill of Rights is fundamentally based on negative freedom, meaning that there are restrictions on what the government can do to the individual. They can't abridge religion or free speech. And that's the fundamental basis of the Constitution. I believe our original founders were very concerned, obviously, after what the causes of our revolution, about what government could do to the individual. And that's the basis of the Bill of Rights. Positive freedoms are the right to do what we want to do, to act without being acted upon. I think the difficulties today, in some measure, result from the fact that we have evolved or morphed our vision of those freedoms. For example, in the negative freedom category, that's really freedom from something. And now we view it's not just freedom from government interference, we believe in freedom from poverty, that the things that we should be free from have expanded from those things that restrict us to those things that may be just inherent in our environment. And so we see an ever-expanding role of government to alleviate some of those things, so that it's not the role of government that restricts us, somehow it's the role of government that enhances us. In the positive side, we have come to believe that it's not just that I am free to be as good as I can be, the American dream, to that I can build a life for myself and for my family that is better than it was before. The individualistic spirit of the frontier spirit, for example. And now it is that the government's role is to give us resources for us to be able to do things. And so in today's environment, what we see is that the role of government is ever expanding, both in a negative freedom way and in a positive freedom, so that we are now becoming, if not completely, largely dependent on the government to give us freedom. And I don't really think that was the original intent of our founders, and I don't think that's the direction that we necessarily ought to go. The more that government does, the more it restricts us. For example, if it gives an advantage to remove poverty or want in the world, it also has to find those resources. Well, those resources either come from taxing other people, or in today's environment, which is really even scarier, that we're not paying for the money we're spending, which means we are pawning that cost off on future generations.
Absolutely.
So now our children are paying for our benefit today, and I don't think that's the right way we should go.
I agree. I just heard a quote from President Carter when he was in office, that to pass on debt the way that we're doing, it's immoral.
It is.
And here we are decades later, we've lost sight of that, even more so.
We somehow believe that government expenditures, government activity has no cost to society, and that is simply incorrect. And so really what we should be doing today is trying to determine what's the appropriate role of government. How much should the government be taking from one group to give to another group? How do we create an egalitarian society in which there is opportunity for everyone? Not that we are all equal, but that we all have equality of opportunity.
How do you think the Constitution in today's environment should be restricting our government?
Well, originally the founders were pretty adamant that government needed to be restricted. And when you think about it, the Bill of Rights was added because there was a number of representatives in the Constitutional Convention that would not sign the Constitution without very specific restrictions on what the government could do to us, what liberties we could have as individuals within the society. So I believe our founders would be quite concerned about the ever-encroaching role of government in our society. And honestly, this isn't necessarily a left versus right disagreement. Both sides agree with freedom. It is really how it comes about. And quite honestly, conservatives are even okay with the government expanding its role. It's just the role that they want them to have. And I think we would be well advised not to argue over symptoms, which is what we are doing today, but to roll back our discussion and talk about foundational principles.
That's excellent. Dave, tell me your thoughts on American exceptionalism. First of all, tell me what American exceptionalism is not.
We are not a perfect society. We should not compare ourselves against other cultures, other societies, and say we are better than them. That's not really what American exceptionalism is about. American exceptionalism is about aspirational goals, who we aspire to be, who we want to be. We will never be a perfect society. There hasn't ever been one. but we should strive to be better than we are today, and that we are unique in that we aspire to be a society in which there is freedom and liberty and an egalitarian role.
So speak for a moment. Speak to a family, say a young family that their children are very young, beginning to enter, say, into their school years. And the narrative that they're being told is that America is evil, that our past is evil, and because of that, today we are evil. What would you say to them? How would you want to help shape their view of how to teach their children that our country is exceptional?
First off, in one respect, they're right. We have had rules, we have had social mores that are not what we would like. Slavery is a classic example of that. That is abhorrent at any place in our society.
Would you also argue, though, that we're the only country that's ever shed blood over slavery?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
And so it's not a matter of, at any given point, to look at all the things that are wrong. We should look at it over a longer time frame and ask the question, are we better today than we were when we started?
That's great.
Are we better today than in the immediate prior to the Civil War? Are we better today than we were in the early 1900s? Are we better today than we have been in the past? And I think if you look at the broad scope of history of our country, you would have to say that we are constantly becoming better than we were, and that we aspire, not just that we are better, but that we aspire to be better.
A more perfect union.
Yes, absolutely. And so, on the one hand, yes, they're correct in saying there are some things that we have done bad to indigenous people, to people that came over under indentureship or slavery, but we don't have those today. We are better than that today. We look at things like when we took the Nisei in the immediate aftermath of Pearl Harbor and put them into relocation camps. We understand today that that was probably not correct, and we would not do that today if that happened. So what does American exceptionalism mean? It means that we aspire to be better than we are. And not every country believes that. I stood watch on the East German border. I looked across a multiple lines of fences that were not designed to keep anyone out. They were designed to keep their people in. I have been through Checkpoint Charlie when Berlin was a divided city. I have seen the dramatic difference between a vibrant, free capitalist economy and a controlled command economy. I've seen the differences in those. And I have looked at the face of evil across that fence. And quite honestly, we have looked at the face of evil in Afghanistan. We have looked at the face of evil when we saw the towers come down. There is always evil in the world, and that we always have a necessity for people to stand watch against that evil, for us to stand against that evil, not for us to look at it and say, oh, those are bad people, but to make a stand against that and to say, those aren't the principles that we have. It may be a more effective form of controlling their people, but that's not who we are, and that's not who we want to be.
That's excellent. It's not our principles.
Right.
When I think of American exceptionalism, I think of our values. When I think of our values, I go straight to the Bill of Rights.
Absolutely.
Is that the right way of thinking?
I believe that those are foundational statements of what we believe in and what we aspire. I mean, aspiration is the piece, because we are never perfect. I mean, we know in our world, we know we are not perfect people. I mean, we all have sin. I mean, we all have that.
Right.
And we know that. And that manifests itself in some of the things that we have done.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean we can't be better than that.
And it doesn't mean that we're not learning from it,
Yes.
right?
And my former pastor, Greg DePriest, made a comment that faith is living today as if the world you want to have already has come true. Isn't that what American exceptionalism really is? That we try to live today as if the world we want is here, and we fail and we make it better, and we fail and we make it better. But we never give up our faith in believing that our society can be better than it is today.
If you could change one thing in today's climate, what would you attempt to change?
I would attempt to change the way we discuss our differences. We are constantly fighting over the symptoms. We are not going back to the foundational principles and trying to find where we actually agree with each other and where we departed along the way. We will never come to agreement if we're constantly fighting about the symptoms. We may find, and I believe we would find, common ground. And then from that common ground, ask ourselves, why did we get to where we are? How did those divisions occur? And are there ways for us to reconcile those differences before we get to the animosity that we get today?
When I think of our country right now, I think of someone who is leisurely in the ocean, and all of a sudden they begin drifting, and they don't realize how far they've drifted.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they don't recognize where they are.
Yes.
That's how I feel about our country. We don't recognize it's. Do you agree
Yeah.
that it's unrecognizable? It's getting to that point if things don't change.
We need to be deliberate in our actions.
Okay.
We need to be deliberate in how we view other people in our society. We need to be deliberate in who we vote for, why we vote for them. If we are not deliberate, if we, as you said, if we simply allow ourselves to float around, we will likely be in a place that we don't want to be. I taught strategy at West Point. Strategy is all about understanding where you want to go and then applying your resources to get there. If you don't know where you want to go, you will end up anywhere.
So Dave, when we talk about American values, does socialism, does Marxism, does that fit our values as Americans?
Well, socialism is about the consolidation of decision making, of finances, of control. And as we spoke, our founding documents, the Bill of Rights, were about restrictions on government. And I think when people talk about socialism, and I won't go to communism because and they frequently talk about democratic socialism like you see in countries like Sweden and in Europe, where they have socialized medicine, where they have large social safety nets. They came from a heritage of governmental control, of empires, of monarchies. That is not where we came from. The Bill of Rights was about a list of restrictions of government. We are inherently wary of the consolidation of power. And so I don't think, even if there are merits in parts of that, that is part of our heritage and our aspirational goals. I have been part of two of the largest socialized medical systems in our country, the military and the VA. They have good care, but they are rationed by standing in line. If you looked at the communist countries in Eastern Europe and Russia, it is all about standing in line because you have to ration a scarce good one way or another. In a capitalist system, we ration it by price. We equilibrate supply and demand, and that's the price there is. Can we do better with healthcare? Absolutely. Will we do better by having us stand in line to get adequate care? No.
No.
So I just don't believe that socialism, even democratic socialism, would work in America.
Dave, I can't tell you how intimidating it is for myself to be talking, asking questions to a former West Point professor, but I want to get your answer on this. Are we a democracy or are we a constitutional republic? Will you explain the difference to us?
Sure, but first I want to say, don't be intimidated. I'm just a regular guy too, okay? We come from different backgrounds. There are things in the spiritual realm, for example, that I am extremely intimidated by you. So we all have our own level of expertise, I guess. So please don't be intimidated. Okay, our founding fathers were brilliant in establishing a representative democracy in which we vote, but not everything is a popular vote, and the majority doesn't always win. If you look at our country today, if we did not have the Electoral College, the entire center of the country would be unrepresented. They were brilliant in understanding that we had to allow a way for a voice for everyone in our country and an ability for that to influence our policies. Quite honestly, it is one of the reasons why populism is a danger, because that's all that about everything is a threat to democracy. What they're really saying is that we believe it's a threat to populism, that it ought to be crowd ruled. We know that's not the case. And so having a representative, a republic, in which all of the pieces of the republic are represented, in some ways, the lower house, the House of Representatives, is more related to the individual votes of the person and of districts, so that they are represented. And yet our senators are statewide, and so they represent the broader view that a state or a representative from a district can't really come out with. So our founders were brilliant in how they set us up.
So when you talk about, Sweden and those Scandinavian countries that have democratic socialism, that's where my mind goes, is that our founders set us up to where we have such representation that, yes, we are a democracy, our vote matters, as you said, but we are a constitutional republic. We don't come from monarchs. We don't come from empires. We're able to govern our own backyard. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that is the case. And remember that socialism is about concentration of power. Our setup of our government was about restricting power. And Lord Acton in the late 1800s, and everyone knows this, that power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. So the more you consolidate power, the more you move down that slippery slope towards corruption.
So to conclude, Dave, it's been a great conversation, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your perception with us, your insights with us. Do you believe that we are still a city on a hill? And if so, given your amazing career, your military service, even what you've been able to do as an entrepreneur, what's going to keep us that shining light on a hill?
I believe we are tarnishing that. And again, it goes back to an aspiration. The shining city on a hill is an aspiration. It's not a, oh, there is the city, let's just get to the city. It is about American exceptionalism. We aspire to be that for the world. We're not that. but we move ever closer to that. And the degree to which we say, oh, there's nothing exceptional about us, we start to tarnish that vision. And how do we resurrect that? We start to believe in ourselves again. We start to believe that we are the solution to our problems, not the government.
Wonderful. Well, Dave, let me ask you one last question.
You said that 2 or 3 times.
Exactly. That's the pastor in me, right? Closing number 1. Closing number 2. If you were not doing what you are currently, what would be your dream job?
I've sort of built my dream jobs along the way. I loved being in the military. I love being an entrepreneur and building things. I love being able to build things that enhance other people's lives, that I get to employ people. I'm now transitioning towards working with companies to try to build our economy in a way here that we haven't done before, to attract technology companies, to attract growth companies to our region. So I'm actually doing a lot of the things I love to do, and I look back at roads not taken, but I don't regret the decisions I've made in life.
It's a life well lived.
I hope.
When I planted my church, I had an older man. I was only 20 years old, and I had an elderly man come to me, and he said, when you find what you love, you'll never work another day in your life.
That's absolutely
correct. And he was right.
Yes.
Dave,
absolutely.
Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for sharing with us and helping us think well.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, if you have enjoyed these discussions and you want to learn more, I want to encourage you to visit my website, awakenedtograce.com. You can also download my free mobile app. Wherever you get your favorite app, simply search Awakened to Grace. And when you get our content, literally hundreds upon hundreds of resources are right at your fingertips. Thank you so much for joining us. Connect with us. Visit awakenedtograce.com today. Miles, thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts with us today. I've really enjoyed getting to know you some, and I want to welcome you today.
Thank you, Chad, for the opportunity. I have been looking forward to this, so I'm glad the day is here.
Well, Miles, I've really enjoyed learning about your background, and I think one of the reasons, not only are you an important leader here in my community that I live and in this region, not only do you have an influential voice that I think really adds to what we want to do in this project of We the People, your past military experience, I think, gives you an even stronger voice. It gives you a great perspective. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and what's led you to where you are today?
Well, thank you, Chad. I'm not sure about the kind words, but I do appreciate and respect them. I've been at the Kingsport Chamber 28 years, and I truly enjoy coming to work every day. I get to work with the businesses and the community and to help better the lives of our citizens and to help improve the business climate for our community, our region, and in some cases our state. So I truly enjoy doing that. I'm the father of 3 daughters and the grandfather of 3 daughters. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I also have 3 granddaughters, and have a grandson on the way. And I'm married to Denise, and we have been for coming on 39 years.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Miles, I really have enjoyed your perspective from your military background. Will you tell us about that?
So in May of 1980, I stood in front of another Marine officer and repeated these words, the oath of enlistment. I, Miles Burdine, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter. So help me God. And since that day, I've tried to live my life and tried to serve my country, keeping those words in mind. I think it's very important to note, before I talk about my military career, that there's a book called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge.
Yes.
And it's a faith-based book. It's an important book in my life. And in that book, there's a quote that says, all a man really wants, he may have forgotten it, may have lost focus on it, but all a man really wants is a battle to fight, a beauty to protect, and an adventure to experience. Now, the reason I say that, and the reason I open with that oath of enlistment, oath of office, is that I got to do what I wanted to do. I took that obligation, that oath of office freely, and I left behind a wife and children as I was serving my country. And so anytime someone comes and thanks me for my service, I always am quick to say, please thank my wife, please thank my children, and while I was in the reserves, please thank my employer for allowing me the opportunity to serve. I got to do what I wanted to do. Those who are serving now got to do what they wanted to do. Nobody forced them to do it. So as we thank our veterans, which is important to do that, we should also thank their families.
Wonderful point. Well, we do sincerely thank you,
Well, thank
and
you.
we thank your family as well.
Well, thank you. My military career spanned 30 years. I got a letter in 2009 saying, 2010, you will have served 30 years. You're not going to get promoted, so you're done. P.S. We'll call you back if we need you. It's worded a lot nicer than that, a lot bigger words, but that's what it said. So for 30 years, I had the distinct pleasure of serving among those who believe like I do, honorable men and women who are willing to sacrifice themselves for their country. And my personal career was spanned 30 years, as I mentioned, 1980 to 2010. And had 4 deployments, 3 of which to a combat environment. And would I do it again? I'm often asked. Absolutely. I'd still be serving today if I was allowed to do so.
So, Miles, in recent polls, there's been some with ABC, with NBC. In recent polls, right now, 85% of Americans are concerned about the direction the country is going. What are you concerned about?
First off, that's a very disturbing number, and I'm sure it's accurate. I hate that it is. I, like my father and my whole family, I've always chosen to be an optimist because we choose to be an optimist. And but there are things that disturb me greatly about the direction of this country. First off is a lack of civility, which brings divisiveness. I mean, it's okay to disagree with what I believe, but don't hate me because of that. Don't try to cause me harm because we disagree. But we're seeing more and more of that in our country. Another concern I have is social media. People not being held accountable for what they're saying on social media. Just because it's on social media does not mean that it's true, and also does not often give the opportunity to give the other side of the story, if you will. And the third thing is somewhat a lack of leadership. I've often thought about it this way. Was Saddam Hussein a leader? Was Adolf Hitler a leader? Is Vladimir Putin a leader? Yes, they were, and yes, he is. But they use their skills to lead in a way that our world does not benefit. Think about if those 3 leaders were to lead in a positive way, how much better off our world would be. So those 3 things in particular concern me. You know, I do a presentation on leadership called Scrubbing Toilets with Enthusiasm. That topic, that title gets people's attention immediately, so it usually works pretty well. But in that presentation, I talk about leadership and how I've been inspired and have been led by people who I should be leading and inspiring. But instead, they turn the tables and lead and inspire me. And it's people you wouldn't necessarily think of as leaders. It's people like my daughter, my dog, 2 custodians, a Lance Corporal in the United States Marine Corps, 3rd lowest rank in the Marine Corps, an employee, people I'm supposed to be leading, but instead they led me. So my point in saying that is everybody can be a leader. Everybody is a leader. It's just a choice on what kind of leader you choose to be. But I'll further say that, you know, when I get disgruntled about where our country's headed and I get downtrodden about what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, I start thinking about people's words, the things they say on social media and how it can hurt people, but how they can help people instead. And But sometimes when I get so disgruntled, I'll just sit down and my therapy is I've got a book on Medal of Honor recipients. And I'll open up and read a few of those. And I feel better. And I also go back and perhaps watch a movie such as Taking Chance, which is a movie about starred Kevin Bacon. And it's about Chance Phelps, who was killed in Iraq while protecting his country. And Kevin was a Marine officer who escorted his body home, and the respect that was given to that trip, to the Marine officer and to the young Marine who was killed in combat. And it makes you feel better about our country because of the way they're respected and the way they're treated. So that's my therapy.
Well, I like that you have go-tos that, you know, we live, as you know, we live in a climate right now that narratives are being pushed and it's constant, right? And whether it's media or whether it's, you know, from social media to just the news, we're always being led down these narratives, and it can be overwhelming at times. And what I got out of what you said is that you look for opportunities for optimism. Do you think, what would you say to someone who they've just disengaged? Their feelings is, I can't change anything. Everything's just, you know, what can I do? What would you say to them to help find optimism?
Well, first off, I'd say it's not true. There is something that they can do, and that's to be positive. That's to engage back in the community. That's to be enthusiastic, and that's to be supportive, and that's to go help others. You know, my dad taught me years ago. He said, "Son, if you're having a bad day, go do something good for somebody. You'll feel better. And if you really want to feel good feel better about your day, don't let them know you did it."
Oh, that's great.
So there's a lot of validity to that.
That's right. When you say things like that, I tell you what immediately came to my mind. A quote by President Eisenhower. Perhaps you're familiar with this quote. He said, "America is not good because it's great. America is great because it's good." Do you think if we got back to that optimism, the kindness, the loving one another, the being kind to your neighbor, what difference would that make in today's climate?
Well, it'd make a huge difference. Make a huge difference. I mean, I look at our community, Kingsport. We are so fortunate here. The spirit of Kingsport is alive and well. And the things that are accomplished in Kingsport, nobody cares who gets the credit. They just want good things to happen in Kingsport. Now, having said that, I know there's some people out there who are negative. But it's incumbent upon us, those who are positive, you, me, others, to pull them along, to show them that there are good things happening in our community, that there are good people in our community. And there's a lot more good people than there are those who are negative.
I fully agree with that. And that's why people are flocking here from everywhere.
Yes. 80 to 100 families a month are moving here. We're very proud of that fact.
You know, my wife, Sadie, as many of our listeners know, I'm completely blind. And my wife, Sadie, and I recently had a flat about almost an hour away from our house. And first flat that we've had since I've been blind. And this couple stopped to help us. And they live here in our region. Never met them, didn't know them at all. And not only did they help us, they would take no money for it whatsoever. We tried to pay them. Not only did they help us, they went back and they got tea and Sprite and other drinks for our kids. And they were just so kind. And I told them, I said, it's people just like you. That's why families are moving from everywhere to come here.
That's a wonderful story. And, you know, I've so enjoyed getting to know you, Chad, and first got to know you through your wife, Sadie, and that's a good story. But I also want to say to you, and he's not paying me to say this, by the way. So, you know, my favorite movie is Braveheart, and in that movie, there's a quote that I truly love: "Men don't follow titles; they follow courage." And the courage that you have shown. As you've gone through what you've gone through, and the courage that Sadie and your children have shown as you've gone through what you've gone through is truly admirable and greatly respected.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Miles, tell me this. the America that you want your grandchildren to grow up in, what would have to change now to see that happen in their lifetime? What would you want to see change?
I'm going to go back to the three problems, that the three concerns I have about the direction this country's headed. And if we could address all three of those things, I'm still not exactly sure how to address them. But I think a lot of it comes down to people's attitude toward their community, toward their state, toward their nation, and holding people accountable for their positive attitude or their negative attitude, and just continue to move forward from the bad stuff and move toward the good stuff. I know that doesn't sound especially educational, but that's the truth. I mean,
There's a world of truth in it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I tell people as I face blindness, there are many days I have to choose joy.
Yeah.
I have to choose it. I don't feel it all the time, but days that it's harder than others to get out of bed, I have to say, no, I'm going to choose joy today. And I think, I don't think our attitudes are left up to haphazard circumstances. Do you?
No, absolutely not.
It's a choice.
Well, in fact, the presentation I mentioned to you earlier about scrubbing toilets with enthusiasm also talk about there's a young kid in there with who has Down syndrome, another one who was born with many disabilities, but yet both of them are remarkable individuals that are actually giving inspirational speeches across our country. And then one of our employees' son, who has Down syndrome, inspires me every time he comes into the office. So we call him the pickpocket, because once you meet him, he steals your heart. So anytime you're thinking about, man, I'm just not having a good day, man, I got a lot of obstacles in my life, I have a lot of adversity. No, I don't. Not compared to some others, not compared to Chad Roberts, who faces his adversity with a smile on his face. So I think about people like that, people like you, and I feel better about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Miles, one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you as a guest in this project is because when you and I met in person some weeks ago, you shared with me about your last deployment, and you shared with me why the military put you in the position that they did. I felt like that gave you such a great perspective. Will you share a little bit about that with our audience?
I sure will. And actually, I thought about that story, and I will share that story here in just a minute. When there's a podcast that's going on these next few weeks that features Republican Governor Haslam and Democratic Governor Bredesen. Both very civil, very smart individuals. And the title of their podcast is You Might Be Right. The title is based on Senator Howard Baker, who once said to some of his colleagues, you know, that other fellow might be right, talking about someone on the other side of the aisle. And so it inspired me to think about one of my experiences when I had in Iraq in 2005, 2006. And where I was stationed was Ramadi, the Al-Anbar province in Iraq, and at that time the Al-Anbar province was considered, and Ramadi and especially was considered the most dangerous, most violent place in the world.
Wow.
So violent that even the national government would not come to support the province because they were afraid of getting killed. Well, I was recruited to go to Ramadi to head up the Civil Affairs Detachment. I didn't even know what Civil Affairs was. I was always just a dumb grunt, and I especially enjoyed being an infantry officer. But because of my background with the chamber, I was asked to come and do some chamber type stuff, which was help build government, hold elections, hire police chiefs all over the province. So it was my duty on a daily basis to work with the governor of the Al-Anbar province, Mamoun Sami Rashid Alawani. Not only was it my job to help do those things that I mentioned, but I was also responsible for keeping the governor alive, which was not an easy task in itself. Oof. I was also responsible for teaching him about courage, about democracy. But he turned the tables on me many times. And while I was supposed to be leading and inspiring him, he did that to me. And there was one particular occasion, that story that I shared with you, and we had had a hard time getting our enemies to come to the table to negotiate. They just wouldn't do it. Until we said to them at one time, we wanted to negotiate the withdrawal of American forces from the Al-Anbar province. Well, that got their attention and got them to the table. The conversation did not start well because our initial accusation was quit shooting off roadside bombs. You're hurting Marines. They initially denied it several times until finally they did admit that they were shooting off roadside bombs, improvised explosive devices. And their explanation for that was, if we fight you in the streets, you're better fighters, you're better organized, you're stronger, and you got better weapons, and you kill us. But if we shoot off a roadside bomb, we might get lucky and hurt one of you, especially lucky and kill one of you. Most importantly, it'll be shown back home on American TV, which breaks Americans' will, which gets you out of here. Well, I didn't react the way I probably should have. I got up and turned my back and started to stomp out. Governor Moon followed me out the door. And he said, Colonel Burdine, where are you going? I said, well, we're going to go settle this the way we've been settling. If they want to continue to fight, we'll continue to fight, and we'll continue to kill them. And he says, if you leave right now, you will accomplish nothing. He said, they understand your words, they understand your tongue, but they don't, they understand your sword, but they don't understand your words. They don't understand your tongue. So come back and talk. And then he put his finger in my face and he said, you know what? You might be wrong. That got my attention.
Wow.
So I went down, we sat back down around the table, and Governor Moon was right. I was wrong. I needed to hear what these gentlemen had to say, former Iraqi Army officers. They stated their case. We certainly did not solve all of our differences, but we did solve some, and we saw some progress thereafter. So there are the three very important lessons I learned from that particular episode. One, started to enter every meeting that I encountered when there was going to be a difference of opinion, and I still to this day enter that opinion with, I might be wrong.
Wow.
And I also learned that about hope, because when I left that meeting later on that evening, I sat there and I thought, if I had no hope, if I had no job, if there were no ways of me feeding my family, and somebody said, here's $100, go shoot off a roadside bomb to feed your family, would you do it? I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I think it's very possible that I would. Lack of hope, lack of education. I now tell our teachers, now you're not just in teaching business, you're in the hope-giving business, because if somebody doesn't have a skill, somebody doesn't have an opportunity for education, then they probably don't have much of a chance to succeed. But the biggest thing I learned from that was civility, sitting and talking. If men who wanted to kill each other were willing to sit and talk about their differences and perhaps come up with a solution to and compromise to their differences, then why can't we, average American citizens, do the same?
Fantastic point. Wow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for sharing that. Miles, I think your voice is so important, and I think you are able to articulate how we, at least how I feel. Maybe I don't know how to quite say it, and I think you've just captured it in a wonderful way. Thank you for taking your time to share with us. Let me ask you one last question.
Okay.
If you weren't doing the job you are right now, which I think you're doing an amazing job, what would be your dream job?
That's an easy answer, but first let me say, my dream job is what I'm doing.
Love it.
But the second part of that answer is, the easy part of it is, I'd be still serving as a United States Marine. I loved it, and I miss it.
Fantastic. Miles, I've so enjoyed getting to know you better, my friend. I thank you. I'm thankful that you are helping lead our community. Thank you for your perspective today.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for the opportunity.
If you want to learn more about the resources that we create, I want to encourage you to go to my website, awakenedtograce.com. You can also download my free mobile app wherever you get your favorite apps. When you download Awaken to Grace to your device, literally hundreds upon hundreds of resources, just like what you've watched today, is right at your fingertips, and it's all free. Join our community today. Learn about Awaken to Grace. Connect with us so that you can continue to grow and learn along with us. I hope you've enjoyed this series, We the People.